I think we're experiencing a bit of a renaissance of LEGO's architecture theme. From about 2020 to 25, each year really only produced a single set or two, but here in 2026, architecture is back in a big way. Starting the year strong with two of its most interesting skyline sets ever for Paris and New York, and then of course later this year, we're getting the largest LEGO set ever, right out of the architecture line, with Sagrada Familia. Yet tucked rather quietly between these releases is a brand new rendition of London's iconic Tower Bridge. At 3,700 pieces, it's nothing to sneeze at, but does it manage to stand out in a year of such bold architecture releases? And how does it compare to the massive Tower Bridge that LEGO made back in 2010? Well, we had better take a closer look. Thank you to LEGO for sending over the architecture sets to review. Over the years, LEGO has done 3 official sets featuring the Tower Bridge, the original massive 4,000 piece model in 2010, a smaller skyline version of London that prominently features the bridge, and then of course there's the brand new 2026 architecture set. Let's get the little skyline set out of the way. I was shocked to find that this is actually still available on lego.com. It has been available for ages. And because it's been around so long, it is really cheap to pick up secondhand. It's certainly not a bad parts pack at all, and I was able to find this for $20, which was fantastic. I think the bridge looks quite respectable at this small scale. It certainly is immediately recognizable, and it makes use of some quite fun elements, especially the flexible hosed pieces for the steel girders on each side of the bridge. You can tell that the edges are certainly compressed significantly, but the main structure of the bridge, the middle section, looks proportional to the actual real-life location. Overall, a lovely little set, but definitely pales in comparison to these two behemoths. We'll get back to the 2010 model in a moment, but I'm guessing a lot of you want to take a look at the brand new architecture set. Funnily enough, at the time of recording this, I don't actually know how much this is going to cost, but I will have the correct information on the screen. I can definitively say though that this has 3,745 pieces, and even though it is slightly smaller, probably about 25% smaller than the original 2010 model, it's still way bigger than I expected it to be. In fact, it is fun to compare these two size-wise, side by side. Jamie Berard, the designer of the original 2010 Tower Bridge, did say he ended up compressing that middle section of the bridge just to keep the size somewhat under control so that it could realistically fit on a table. What table that could possibly be, I still have no idea. It is a bonkers huge model. But the newer one is much more proportionally accurate. So it is fun to see that even though these are certainly scaled differently from each other, they nearly end up being the same exact length altogether. I don't have exact ratios or anything like that, but to give you an idea of the scales we're working at, the bridge is 8 studs wide on the new 2026 model, and the bridge is 10 studs wide on the 2010. The biggest change that stands out to me with the newer model is the colors. But looking at real pictures of the bridge, the blue is much more vibrant, like is portrayed here with the medium azure. I don't think it necessarily plays that well as a color with perhaps the sand green, but this is relatively accurate from what I can tell to the actual structure. A structure I'm hoping to actually see later this year. I'll report back with my findings then. Another standout feature of the new model is going to be all the printed pieces included here. The original 2010 set only had 2 printed elements. Those are the shields that you can find on the upper walkways of the tower. But here, all of the window elements are indeed printed. I believe there are 5 unique window prints included in this set and many multiples of each. These are going to be incredibly useful elements for many things outside of Tower Bridge. They're really generic, great microscale detailing pieces. Though I must admit their incorporation in this model sometimes leaves something to be desired. Here in the model, many of them are just slapped onto snot bricks rather than being fully incorporated into the walls, which is not exactly how it looks on the actual Tower Bridge. As you would expect too, there is of course a degree of functionality in this set. The bridge does raise on both sides, but only up to this extent. The instructions, funnily enough, mention that the bridges can raise up to 87 degrees. So it's weird to call that out in the literature, but not follow through with that on the build. Nonetheless, this part of the bridge looks really great. I especially love just how seamless it looks, especially on the road surface. You can hardly tell that there's a dent in the road for these to slip under. That looks great, and I love the detailing on the underside as well. It's far superior to what was done in the 2010 model, that's for sure. Thanks in a large part to the many pieces that have been introduced since 2010. The build process for the 2026 Tower Bridge is really unique and quite unlike anything I've seen before from LEGO. As you can imagine, this is a very repetitive build. It is mirrored on both sides, and so you get one singular instruction booklet and you end up doing a very interesting ×2 process about halfway through that book to construct each of the towers. It is nice to see that they saved a lot of wasted paper in doing that, but with architecture being a theme that does appeal to LEGO normies, I could see that being a bit confusing and unclear as you go through the instructions. Another great printed element included in this set is the detailing in the center upper walkway portion. It is mentioned in the instructions that this is a direct callback to the original Tower Bridge set, reusing a lot of that same iconography that you can find on the original shield. At the end of the day, while the build definitely runs the risk of actually being over-detailed in relation to the source material, I do like the aesthetic of this bridge more than the original 2010. That is helped too by a much bolder color scheme, which makes this just a bit more memorable and eye-catching of a model, even if it isn't quite as large and obnoxious as the original. So let's go back and take a look at the 2010 version, a pretty iconic set for its time, and easily the largest set released in 2010. As I mentioned earlier, this was designed by a rather legendary product designer at LEGO, that's Jamie Berard, one of the longtime judges on LEGO Masters USA, so a person that I've actually gotten to meet in person, and he's just such a lovely, humble dude, and obviously insanely talented. He is also responsible for designing many of the early modular buildings. Here, I'll open up the bridge to show you how far these segments can open in comparison to the newer model. They are not as pretty to look at, but the more realistic functionality is nice. These just use simple friction pins to be held in place, and they are really light sections just because there's not a lot of detailing here, whereas the new bridge uses ratcheting joints instead. So they feel a bit stronger and they're easier to line up with each other on either side. This set was actually recently featured on Cheesy Studios because it showed up in my Cheese Slope video. This is the set that has the most cheese slopes ever, with 556 tan cheese slopes. That's a huge percentage of the set's 4,287 pieces. Now, this was not actually released as part of the architecture line. Jamie described it as being part of the world buildings line, a theme that includes items like the original Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal, and also even the Statue of Liberty. It seems to have been a theme that absolutely necessitated bonkers massive models. In fact, the second largest set released in 2010 would have been the UCS Imperial Shuttle, and it has about half the pieces this set has. A few key differences here compared to the newer model are going to be, first of all, the construction on top of regular base plates. The set makes use of no less than 5 16x32 blue base plates. The tower roofs up top are done in the less vibrant light bluish gray, but I feel the new sand green actually matches the lichen and moss that grows on those shingles much better, and I think is a more accurate representation of the real world location. I do think Jamie's brick built windows work a little bit better in this model. They're more flush with the tower walls themselves, which is once again what you see on the real Tower Bridge. I also like that because of the larger scale, the set makes use of the dual colors for the steel girders running up the sides. Neither set surprisingly incorporates the cables that actually run down along the sides here, but I could see that being messy and finicky to build more so than elegant anyway. I do love that both sets make use of the classic lattice fence piece here. It is really quite the perfect match. This set in particular would look amazing too with a lighting kit. Because the newer model uses all opaque printed window pieces, it just wouldn't work at all. This, however, could look quite stunning, and I'm sure every lighting kit company ever has already made a kit for this one. So there you go. That's a quick little look, or probably not that quick of a little look, at these two monster sets. No matter how you slice it, both are extremely impressive in terms of their scales, and I think each reflects the very unique period which it was born into. Anyway, I'd love to know what you think. Do any of you actually have the original Tower Bridge? And if so, I would love to know if you incorporated it into your own Lego City and had Lego City cars going through it. I think that would look so, so cool. Thank you so much as always for watching, and I hope you have yourself a fantastic life.